Hi team, I hope you're all well. Today I am going to be wrapping up the first half of November, so this is my recent reads for the first half of November. I managed to read 11 books in the first half of November, which isn't too bad, but I also DNF'd 4 books, which I'm a little bit mad about. So yeah, overall it was generally good, but yeah. I have been taking part in 4 readathons throughout the first half of the month. So those are DoSaBalong, the 1000 Doors Readathon and Believathon, and also Galleyathon. So let's go through these. I will try and be as quick as I can. The first half of these I do have a reading vlog for, but the second half, Galleyathon, I've not got a reading vlog for. I ended up really hating the footage because I just kind of fell to the wayside as the week went on, and I just became more grumpy and grumpy. So I decided to get rid of the footage. I didn't want to have to see myself through that while editing it, and I didn't want you guys to be seeing it either. So I decided to delete that footage, which is a shame, but whatever. So the first book that I managed to finish for the first half of November is Daughter of Smoke and Bone. This is for DoSaBalong. If you don't know about DoSaBalong, this is a read-along hosted by Maddie from Book Browsing Blog. I will leave a link to her channel and announcement video down below. Go and check her out. She's awesome. She's got this sick TBR game called Dart Attack, and it's amazing. Please do go and check her out. And DoSaBalong is the Daughter of Smoke and Bone read along, and we're reading a book a month for the next 3 months. So this one in November, the next one, which is Days of Blood and Starlight, in December, and then the third one, which is called, I can't remember and I don't know where the book is, Dreams of Gods and Monsters, in January. I also got Night of Cake and Puppets as well. I will be reading that one, but that's not part of DoSaBalong. So yeah, so we're reading the first 3 over the next only 3 over the next 3 months. So if you want to take part, you're not late by any means. I just read this really early on in the month because I didn't think I was going to like it, and as it turns out, I was wrong. I gave this 4.5 stars. So Maddie was totally right with this. I have read the Stranger Dreamer series and I wasn't a huge fan. The writing was a little bit too flowery for me, and the story was something completely different than I thought it was going to be. However, I went into this pretty much knowing exactly what was going to happen. So this is following a girl called Carew, who basically kind of follows 2 different lives. So she follows this life where she goes to a college, an art school with her best friend, and she just lives a normal student life. And then the other half of it is that she was brought up by this monster, if you like, called Brimstone, and he uses her to collect teeth, and he uses them for things. She's not sure what, but she ends up starting to ask some questions because things seem to be getting a little bit weird. She starts asking some questions, and her entire life is changed forever. It's very good. I thought this was very fast paced. I thought the writing was almost a completely different author to the Stranger Dreamer series, to be honest, but I could still feel bits of Laini Taylor in there, so it was really good. I'm actually glad that I've done it this way round and read the Stranger Dreamer duology and then got into the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, because I think had I read this and then read Stranger Dreamer, I'd have been a little bit let down. But having read Stranger Dreamer and not going into this with not too high expectations, I think it's really sort of lifted me. And I only gave it 4.5 on the basis that I think this series has got a lot of room to grow, and I want to see that growth in the ratings I'm giving it. So it would have got a 5-star otherwise, but just kind of want to see it grow in the ratings because I loved this. I thought it was fantastic. It was jam-packed with fantasy and all the paranormal things and all that lot. It's jam-packed with friendship, it's jam-packed with potential relationships, and I just had such a good time with it. And the action as well, it just keeps you, it just goes and goes and goes, and I just really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to pick up the next one. So I'm really excited. 4.5 stars. Maddie, you nailed it. Thank you so much. Next, I read The Haunting of Pelham City, which is the second in the Potkin and Stubbs series by Sophie Green. I loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was so good. Potkin and Stubbs series is following a young girl called Lil Potkin, who wants to be a reporter for the Claxton, which is like an underground newspaper in Pelham City where she lives. And her mum works for the mayor basically, and there is a proper paper called the Herald, which is the only paper that gets released on, you know, a daily basis. The Claxton, with it being an underground paper, it is the only paper that actually reports the real news. The Herald is reporting what the mayor wants it to report, and she wants to work for the Claxton because it's a real newspaper telling real news. And basically she wants to be seen. She's looking for a story that will get her seen, and she doesn't realise that the story may be sitting across from her in the bus station in the form of Nedley Stubbs. And that's all I can tell you, because I can tell you nothing about this. It follows directly on from the first series, from the first book, and it will spoil the first book, so I can tell you nothing about it. But I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I gave the first one 4 stars, just for context, and I love this series. Did I give it 4 stars? Did I give it 4 stars? Yeah. And I love this series. It's so good. I can't wait to read the next one. This is a middle grade series, and I read this to get the key for Believathon. It was fantastic, and look at this cover. It's just gorgeous. I'm obsessed with it. So yeah, highly recommend trying this series if you haven't already. It's very, very good. Then I read Gargantuus by Thomas Taylor, which is another middle grade. This is the second in the Malamander series. So Malamander I gave 3 stars when I read it last year. It was good, but I think that was very much so setting the scene. We were getting to know Aurora, which is the place, the town where this is set. We were getting to know Herbie Lemon, who is one of our main characters, and also Violet Palmer, who is our other main character. It was a lot of scene setting, but also the story, and this one just took it a whole several steps further. Not just one, several steps further. I gave this 5 stars. It was fantastic. Again, look at the cover, it's beautiful. I loved this. So Herbie Lemon is a young boy who works in the lost and found section of a hotel in Aurora, which is where he lives. And one day a young girl comes in through his window called Violet Palmer. She is trying to run away from someone, and I think, if I remember correctly, she's on a mission to find her parents, and Herbie Lemon helps her out with that. That's what happens in the first book. In the second one, there is like a storm called Gargantuus, and they are trying to defeat the storm, but it turns out that Gargantuus may not be the storm, it may be something else, and people have been getting the lore wrong all this time. What I love about these books is that they weave in folklore, and I just think it's so cleverly done. This one I loved a lot more than Malamander, but I just think the series overall is very, very good. I love Herbie Lemon and I love Violet Palmer, and their friendship is just everything. It's literally so good, and I highly recommend picking this series up. It's fantastic. I gave that 5 stars. Then I read Emilia, Fang and the Unicorn Lords by Laura Ellen Anderson. Laura Ellen Anderson. This is the second in the Emilia Fang series. Lots of series going on here, and these books are so cute. I cannot wait to get a whole set of these because they're adorable. This Emilia Fang is a vampire. She lives in the, what they call the Dark World, I think. Is that right? Kingdom of the Dark is where they live. And she lives with her parents, and she has a pet pumpkin called Squashy, who is adorable, and I'm obsessed with Squashy. It's my favourite. There's also a Yeti called Florence, and a ghoul, or is it death, called Grimaldi. There is a young boy called Tangine, who in the first book is mean to Emilia because he wants a Squashy of his own. He's a spoilt brat basically, and his dad is King Vladimir, and his mum is Fairyweather. And then there's some other characters as well in the first book. And the first one is Emilia Fang and the Barbaric Ball, and her parents are hosting a ball. She doesn't want them to host it. I can't remember what else happens, but in this one they end up going to the Kingdom of Light to try and save Fairyweather, who is what's his name, Tangine's mum. And the Kingdom of Light is basically all the light monsters, so like unicorns and elves and things like that, whereas the Kingdom of Dark is vampires and yetis and things like that. So they end up going to the Kingdom of Light under disguise to try and save Fairyweather, and the adventure ensues. I love this series. I think my favourite part of the series is the illustrations. The narration is very, very good, so if you can get the audio, do get it, but follow along with the book because the illustrations are fantastic and I'm obsessed with it. It's so cute. Laura is just amazing talent, incredible. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was so much fun. And then I read Sheets by Brenna Thumler. I loved this. This is a graphic novel, middle grade graphic novel, which is absolutely beautiful. It has some of the most beautiful illustrations I've ever seen. This is following a young girl called Marjorie Glatt. She's 13 years old and her mother died the previous year. Her dad's in a deep state of grief and does nothing. He barely leaves his room, never mind the flat that they live in above the laundromat that they run. And she's got a younger brother as well. So she goes to school, she runs the laundromat, and that's it. That's all she does with her life. She plays the piano on occasion. And she is just trying to cope and get through life. She doesn't have many friends. She is struggling. She used to like be on the swim team, I think. She doesn't do that anymore. And she's just struggling with life in general. And you go through this process with her. I think she is struggling a little bit with depression. Obviously she's missing a mum, but she's trying to make sure that they can keep living by keeping the laundromat running, and the clients are just not very nice to her at all, considering she lost her mum a year ago. She's 13 years old and she's trying to run this entire business on her own. They're shitty with her. And also there is a man trying to buy the laundromat building off them because he wants to build a spa there instead. Her teacher is one of my favourite characters. This teacher, we see his wife a bit later on in one of the shops, and one of her kids makes a note of the fact that, sort of mentions the fact that this guy is trying to build the building up, and she's really angry about it. And she's really lovely, and they are important for the next book, which I'll mention in a second. But overall, I loved this. It was very, very deep. It went into a lot of deep conversations. So obviously trigger warnings for loss of a parent, and also loss of just in general loss of a child, because we also follow a young boy called Wendell who has died around about the same time as Marjorie's mum died the previous year, and he is the ghost. So basically there is this place where the ghosts go to, and they get given a sheet so that they almost have like a body essentially, because otherwise they're just invisible. And he ends up coming to the laundromat because he wants to leave where he lives. He's not happy with where he's living. He's a little bit depressed, and he wants to go back to the normal world and see if he can live there instead as a ghost. So that's what he does. So loss of a parent, loss of a child, grieving, depression, I would say possibly some anxiety in there as well, bullying as well. So there is a lot in here, so just beware of that before you go into it. But it's such an important graphic novel, and I think this is one that I could read over and over and over again. I had a tear in my eye coming towards the end of this. It was beautiful. I highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. It was so, so good. Then I reread Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I loved this. It was so good. This is basically a very, very short description of this, is that we are following Lou and Reed. Lou is a witch, Reed is a witch hunter, and they end up being forced into a marriage of convenience, and he does not know she's a witch. And the story ensues from there. I forgot completely how this ended. I read it for the first time last year. I've reread it because I want to read Blood and Honey, which is the next in the series. And then I think the third is called Gods and Monsters, and I think that's coming out next year, if I'm correct in that. But I loved this. It was so good. 5 out of 5 stars. I gave it the first time. I've given it 5 out of 5 stars the second time. It's just really, really good. I know there's mixed reviews on this, but I really enjoy the writing style. I really enjoy where the story goes. I thought it was very clever, and I am so hyped for the next one. I loved it so much. It was great. Very quickly, for the 1000 Doors Readathon, let me just go through what I read for that as well, just to let you know. So the first prompt, I went with Emma's prompt, and that was 5. So a title with 5 words in it, a title with 5 letters in it, a 5-star prediction, a book with 5 chapters in it, anything like that. I went with Daughter of Smoke and Bone. It's got 5 words in the title and it was a 5-star prediction. Obviously I gave it 4.5, but it was there or thereabouts. Then the next one was to read, oh, it was Meg. I went through Meg's Door then, and that was I'm Back. It was a gif of I'm Back, and that was to read like Meg's suggestions were the next in a series, a book maybe that you've put down and you want to come back to, things like that. So I went for the next in a series with Potkin and Stubbs, The Haunting of Pelican City. Then I went to Tasmin's channel, and her prompt was to read something that reminded you of the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I stretched this so far it's not even funny, and I ended up going for Gargantuus. So I went for, obviously, the relationship here is Thor with the god of thunder, Gargantuus, the storm, lightning, thunder. That's what I did. I went back to Emma and her prompt was Up. So you could pick a book that would be uplifting. It might remind you of the film Up. It might have Up in the title. So things like that. And I ended up picking 2 books for this one. So I picked both of Emilia, Fang and the Unicorn Lords and Sheets. So Sheets on the basis that ghosts go up. I know they come back down, but ghosts do go up. And Emilia Fang on the basis that this would lift me up. So I read both of those. And then the final prompt was to read a book. It was from Meg, and it was to read a book that would make me cry. So I did pick The House on the Cerulean Sea for this, but I never finished it off. However, this made me cry towards the end. So, listen, if a guy is crying, I will be crying. And Reed cries in this. So, yeah. That's how that went. So the 1000 Doors Readathon I completed. I nailed it in the first week. Yes. If you want to see that reading vlog, I will leave a link to it here. I think it's here. Yes. I will leave a link to it here. You can go and check that out if you want to. So then I went on to Galleyathon, and the first one that I read was Quincredible Quest to be the Best. And this was a graphic novel. I gave it 3. I don't own it, obviously, it's a NetGalley. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. So we're following Quinn, who lives in New Orleans with his parents, and since there was a hurricane there and also another natural disaster, he has ended up with powers where he just can't seem to get hurt at all. He's literally invincible, essentially. And it turns out that there are other people who have powers, who have gained powers, and they kind of have come together and made like a vigilante squad, essentially, if you like. They're trying to keep the city safe. Now the police are against these people massively, and Quinn is going to these rallies with this girl because he fancies this girl, and there is a guy there that is sort of, you know, preaching that we need to take control and things like that, and we need to do better. These people are like supporting the superheroes, whereas the police are not. So they're protesting, and then things go bad, and Quinn manages to sort of help some people with his powers, with his abilities, and then gets seen by one of the superheroes, who then wants to know more about him. Things happen, and he ends up sort of getting to know these superheroes and kind of becoming part of the crew. His parents don't know about it at the time, but the story just kind of goes from there. I thought it was okay. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. The illustrations were fine. I just thought the story was a bit... It's obviously set in the scene, so I'm assuming that there's going to be more of these, maybe. But I feel like it was just set in the scene, and it was a little bit slow and a bit choppy, maybe. I don't know. I just wasn't a huge fan. It was fine. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was just okay. It was fine. And I read Frostheart Escape from Aurora by Jamie Littler. I did have this as a NetGalley, but I never got to it in time because I wanted to wait for Believathon to read this. So yeah, I read this as part of Believathon. I also read it as part of Galleyathon, and I freaking love this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Basically, Frostheart, the first one in the Frostheart series, is following a young boy called Ash, whose parents disappeared a while ago on a mission. They went on a explorer's mission thing, and never came back to the stronghold where they were staying, and he wanted to get out of there basically and go and look for his parents. He is looked after by a yeti and he wants to leave, so he managed to get himself on a boat called the Frost Heart, which came in to sort of bring supplies from Aurora, which is the main town. And he manages to get himself on that boat. The crew know he's on there. The Yeti goes with him, and leave the stronghold that he's in. He didn't like it there. He wasn't treated very nicely there, things like that. He's a song weaver basically, so he can control Leviathans, things like this. And they run into a bit of trouble on their mission back to the stronghold of Aurora, and basically then this carries on straight on from that, so I can't tell you too much about it because it would spoil, but it's so good. Another one with impeccable talent, because he not only writes but he illustrates, and it's incredible. This is Ash and his Yeti, and it's just so good. Tobu is the name of the Yeti, and I just loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I loved the illustrations, the story was great. I swore very loudly the F word and threw this book across the sofa. I didn't want to throw it across the room because it might damage the book, but threw it across the sofa because of where Jamie left us, and now we have to wait for at least a year for the next one. So cheers Jamie for that. Much appreciated. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. This is the Waterstones exclusive edition. It's beautiful and I'm obsessed with it. It's so good. I love this series. Another middle grade for you. Then I read Delicates by Brenna Thumler. You will recognise this cover, may look very recognisable to you. It's the next in the Sheet series, so I loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was fantastic. This story continues to follow on with Marjorie and Wendell's story, but this time, as I mentioned before, the PE teacher and his wife, this follows his daughter as well. So she is kept back a year and she ends up in Marjorie's year at school, and she's obsessed with finding ghosts. She wants to take pictures of ghosts and stuff, and obviously Wendell is a ghost. Marjorie starts getting popular at school and things like that, and she starts leaving the ghosts to the wayside but becoming a different person. And it's a story, this one is the story of her growth of becoming popular, becoming not a nice person, and realising that she doesn't want to be like that. It's the growth of that, and whilst following also this other character and what's going on with her. And it was just really good. I really enjoyed it. Again, the friendships in here were beautiful, the stories were beautiful, and the meanings behind everything, again, very beautiful. Trigger warnings in this one for suicidal thoughts, depression, a lot heavier in this one, and similarly again grief as far as a parent's concerned and a child, and bullying. The bullying is a lot more severe in this one as well, so yeah, just be careful going into that, but it's very good. 4.5 stars. Then I read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I gave this 4 stars. It was so good. I don't usually read horror, and this was like a ghost story horror. I thought it was more like a thriller, but I really enjoyed it. This was very well done. We're following Maggie Holt and her dad Ewan Holt, and basically we are following them in different chapters. So we follow Ewan Holt with the Banbury Hall when Maggie is a young girl and his wife Jess, and they've just bought Banbury Hall, not Banbury Hall, Banbury Hall, and they move in and there are lots of strange goings on, essentially like ghostly goings on in this house. And then we're following Maggie 25 years later. Her dad has just passed, but it turns out he didn't sell Banbury Hall like she thought he had, and she has to go and fix it up and get it up for sale and stuff. But at the same time, she's trying to figure out what's going on, because the story that her dad wrote, Ewan wrote, he wrote it literally with himself, his wife Jess, and his child Maggie within the story, and she has grown up her whole life being recognised as being Maggie Holt, the kid in this ghost story. What happened? How did it make you feel? And she remembers none of it. She thinks it's all made up. So she's trying to piece everything together, and as you are going through the book, the whole thing is being pieced together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, kind of like coming together as you're going through the book, because you've got a chapter from the book that Ewan's written, and then you've got a chapter from Maggie's point of view being back in Bainbury Hall, and it's just very cleverly done. I really enjoyed it. It did spook me out a couple of times, so I did have to put it down at night a couple of times because I'm a scaredy cat, but it was very, very good. This is my first intro into Riley Saga, so I had a really great time with it, and yeah, I would highly recommend it. I was a bit nervous actually about reading this one, but I really enjoyed it. And then the last book that I read for this half of the month was The Forest of Moon and Sword by Amy Raphael. I gave this 2 stars. There are many reasons why I gave it 2 stars, and only a couple why it got the 2 stars. So the good things about this book are the premise of the story. Basically, this is following a young girl called Art, whose mum is taken away by the witch hunters. Essentially, they live in Scotland. She's taken away by the witch hunters. She's accused of being a witch, and she's going to be carted down to Essex with 5 other women for her witch trial, and then drowned or hung, whichever one it is. I think she's being hung. And Art decides that she's not going to stay with her aunt like her mum requests her to, because essentially everyone's already judging her. If her mum's a witch, then she must be a witch, surely. So she decides that she's going to cut all her hair off and, as a boy, go and travel to Essex to try and save her mum. Now, she ends up on her way down coming across different people. She comes across an old woman. She then comes across a young girl who she ends up managing to save, who is being drowned. She's being accused of being a witch, and she's being drowned. And Art saves her, and then this young girl says that she owes her a life, so she's going to help her try and get her mum out. And basically it's just a story of Art trying to save her mum. Now, the premise of that is fantastic. I think it's really, really great that they are exploring the witch trials in a middle grade, and I think it's really good that they're bringing this story to life. I think it's very clever. It could be executed. It could be nailed so well. The downsides of this book are that it's 288 pages long, which is not a bad length, to be honest, but I think this could have benefited from an extra 100 to 150 pages. Basically what's happened is, I think, what it feels like has happened, I'm speculating obviously, what it feels like has happened is that this book was about 350 to 400 pages long, and the publishers or whoever has gone, no, you need to slash that right down, let's get it down to under 300 pages. So they've slashed it, and then not gone back and done another edit. So basically you'll be partway through a conversation between 2 characters, and then that conversation just ends very abruptly, and you're like, oh okay, we're doing this now, fine. And then a conversation might happen between 2 characters, and you get the feeling that there should have been more there, or something else should have happened between them, but then nothing did. It just ended, and you were like, well, what was the point in that entire conversation being there? There was literally no point to it. And it just felt very disjointed, and I don't know, it's really weird. It was very odd. It just felt like it could have done with another round of editing, or another couple rounds of editing maybe. Similarly, the pacing was completely off. Completely off. The not kidnapping, but the taking of her mother happened so quickly. It literally happened in the first chapter, happened very quickly, and Art very quickly then made the decision to leave Scotland and go to England and down to Essex. Then the time period of her going from Scotland down to Essex happened relatively fast, to be fair. She nailed it in a couple of days on a horse, which I don't know how you would manage that, but okay. I don't know, actually. I don't know how long it would take. But anyway, that happened pretty quickly, and then obviously this is a 288 page book, so that happened again pretty quickly, this journey. But then the planning of putting everything together to try and get her mother, and then the execution of getting her mother, was tied up so neatly with a bow. It could have been a Christmas present. Like, it was so neat. Not a single thing went wrong. This Mission Impossible, the whole thing went off without a hitch, and I just could not believe my eyes. I was like, what? Is this for real? So yeah, I don't know. I'm obviously very passionate about how this book was not great. I'm really sorry to the author. I think that they could have done a really, really good job with it. I don't know. It just wasn't great, and I feel a bit bad, but because it's a middle grade, and I wouldn't usually rip a middle grade a new one, but it just wasn't good. I didn't enjoy it that much, to be honest. I think it could have been a lot better. Similarly, just be careful if you do decide to read this one. It is quite violent for a middle grade. There's like a scene in this where about 5 girls are 11 to 12-year-old girls, maybe a little bit older, are sword fighting with some of the soldiers, and it's very detailed in how they disarm and harm and dismember some of these soldiers. It's very violent, and obviously it's the witch trials as well, so it goes into quite a bit of detail of how they are hanging the witches or drowning the witches and for what reasons. There is also a swear word in the first chapter of this book, so just be careful with that. One of the other good things actually that I will say about this book is the girl power is really, really good. Actually, it's a pretty strong thing in here. So yeah, the girl power was great and the premises of the story was good. The rest of it was not. So I'm a little bit bummed about that. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I did buddy read this one with Gav. We did discuss it, and if you want to know his thoughts on it, you can go and check his channel out. I will leave a link to him down below if you want to do that. But yeah, overall I had a really good reading month. I read in first half of my reading month, and I managed to read 11, was it 11 books? I can't remember what it was. But yeah, I had a great start to the month, so there is that. I'm not going to discuss the DNFs. I'm not going to discuss the DNFs in this one. I'll discuss it at the end of the month because I could have more. You just never know. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you got to the end, leave me a ghost down below because I really enjoyed Delicates. It was a great story. The Sheets and Delicates, it was a great story. So leave me a ghost down below if you got to the end of this video, and I shall see you next time. Bye for now.